Welcome in. This is Not All There. I am Chad. On this episode, it's part two of Craving Clarity Meets Not All There. I have a conversation with Brianna today, and we talk about more or less the crossroads of science, faith, and lived experience in addiction and active recovery and sobriety, and how those kind of all interweave. It's a really interesting, thought-provoking conversation. I think it's going to make you think a little, make you talk a little, and that's really what we're hoping to do with this series is to have a good conversation between the two people, but also through that conversation and the questions asked and some of the answers given, that it might make you, the listener or a friend of a listener, have a conversation about addiction and recovery and how science is involved in all of that. It's really interesting, fascinating stuff. I'm really excited about this episode, as I am with the others that I've done. You're really going to like this one. Brianna is great. For more information about Craving Clarity, I will put the website address in the show notes. And I'm stepping out of the way now. Here is part two of Craving Clarity Meets Not All There. Speaking about lived experience with addiction and the science and study of addiction and the crossroads that we're at between the two. It's captivating stuff. I'm really, really happy that we were able to get together and make this happen. So, Brianna, tell us a little bit about the work that you are doing as part of Craving Clarity.
So just a bit of background, my name's Brianna. I am one of the co-founders of Craving Clarity, and I started it whilst I was doing my master's. And Danielle, who you guys have heard from before, was my supervisor. And, we kind of got together with the aim of whenever we read a scientific paper or any kind of research paper, there's always at the end, oh, and we need to do this in diverse groups of populations, and we need to like make this more generalizable to different ethnic minorities and stuff. But we always kind of ask the question of, so where is it? Okay, we've constantly said yes, it needs to be done, yes, the information is lacking, but where is it? Because the likelihood that it is just the Western world that is doing studies in addiction, probably not. So
Right.
then we all got together and we were like, we think that we should provide a platform in which people can come and hear about the works going on in Kenya, Somalia, Latin America, just anywhere that isn't the West in which we've known so far. So then they can learn about addiction in a completely different lens. And I've been primarily focused on the social media side of things and making the blog posts that make the science jargon a lot more interpretable so
Mhm.
that it's a lot more accessible to people, because not everyone knows about the dopamine receptor transporter and what this is doing. And or when we have a speaker and they've gone a bit more into the technical side, when I'm writing that, I'm like, how do we stream that back so someone isn't on ChatGPT using one of the free usage, thinking, oh my gosh, I don't know what they've said, and I'm only 2 minutes and 37 seconds in. So that's what I've been doing, and that's really what we've been championing with Craving Clarity so far. So yeah.
Well, the work you do it's amazing. It really is. And as someone who is just insane enough to read the studies and scientific reports about addiction and mental health and store that away in my brain. Speaking with you, it all makes sense to me, but through our conversations I have found that the combination of the two of us, of with your colleagues, it's a great conversation. It's a great way to break down all of the information where we can have just a normal, like, if you will, coffee shop conversation about
Exactly.
addiction and science and how they meet together. And I find that it's going to be really, really important, especially now here in the States, with the way things are going and how mental health is now apparently a bad thing, and antidepressants are more addictive than heroin, and I don't know, all kinds of horse shit if you ask me. So it's going to be upon us, the people, to deliver the
Yeah.
messages and to do the work. And that's why I'm really honored that we were able to get together and do this. And you guys sent over a sheet that had some ideas and topics that you wanted to speak on. And yours, I mean, they're all very interesting and really exciting. And yours is really interesting and important because we want to talk about faith, spirituality, and addiction, and the trust of science, and how the two of those can meet and help an individual or individuals to find sobriety and maintain sobriety
Yeah.
when they maybe are more like, well, I trust science more than I trust spirituality. That's more like magic and fantasy. It's like, okay, well, how about we can do a little bit of both?
For me, the reason why that was even my interest is because background wise, I'm Ghanaian and religion wise, I'm Christian. But then I'm also an extremely passionate baby neuroscientist that, believes in the science. And I often find myself finding it difficult to navigate where does my beliefs lie that is interpretable to others, And I always describe it as I believe God gave science to us, not to neglect it, not to only say, for example, only trust on me. It's kind of like, when someone says they're depressed, I would say to them, if you're a Christian, you can pray, but you can also go to a therapist too. Don't believe that you have to exile things in the real world that arguably based on what we know God to be, naturally he would have put that service there to help you. And I've always wondered, especially with the work that we've been doing at Imperial, especially past my master's, is that how do these two collide? Because I know people on the other side of the religious spectrum that, they kind of describe addiction to be like a moral failing. And I'm like, it's not though, you can't deny the evidence that is out there. And I just want to firstly like know in, for example, the men's support groups in which you have,
Yeah.
how is that even navigated? Do you ever have like a religious person that's like, I am religious, but I do appreciate that there is help out there for me beyond my faith that I want to know, I want to experience, I want to at least expose myself to.
Absolutely. I mean, I do, yes, specifically. And it's a Thursday that we're recording, and Thursday night I have my men's group meeting in my
Okay.
house. Faith is a I am more of a spiritual person than faith-based person. Now, in at least here in the States, in my observation and in my experiences, I want to make sure I put that out there because it's going to be different for everybody. But that the word faith is more tied in with the word religion.
Yeah.
And spirituality is like, well, those are the dope smokers that, do whatever, they believe in a rock. And it's just like, well, at least they believe in
Cool.
something.
Yeah.
So when in terms of recovery, I got sober in a 12 step
Mhm.
and a lot of 12 step recovery, at least modern day recovery that I have found relies a lot on something greater than you, whether it's in
Okay.
a Christian sense, God and Jesus,
Yeah.
or in a Buddha sense, in everything that Buddha represents. Buddha's more of a the group, the conscience, which I
Yeah.
find is actually more aligned with the 12 steps. But what what we've really drilled down to currently is that God represents everything, right?
Yeah.
Nothing and everything. It's
Mhm.
not one particular entity,
Or
right?
the yeah.
Unless you need it to be. If you need
Mhm.
that, then great. And
Mhm.
if you find that you share that with other people, fantastic, because that's going to help you out, right? To me, and in my recovery, is that if I say, oh, God help me here, what I'm really talking about for me is that it's something bigger than me. Okay. So
Yeah.
what does that mean, dude? Is it something in the sky, in the heavens, in the universe? Sure, okay, whatever, right? Or it can be a person or a group of people, right? The fellowship aspect of recovery, the community aspect of recovery, for someone who is really struggling and they're like, I don't know what this means. Like, I'm supposed to believe in a God. I'm supposed to have faith. I'm supposed to have this. And it's like, you know what? Fine, put your faith in this group of people, right?
Yeah.
That's your
Yeah.
God. That's your faith, right?
Yeah.
And And spirituality, well, that can come later if you need it to, right? You can find that in lots of things. Spirituality can be found in many, many, many aspects of your life and of the world around you. I have a friend who uh, joined the Temple of Satan. And what's interesting
Oh,
is that, yeah, it's hang on. The Temple of Satan, they have a recovery group. And there's like 7,000 plus people in this online recovery community environment.
oh wow.
And they have, gosh, 7 or 8 principles, right? And it's great because the principles are all about being a better person. It's about finding a way to be the better you, and
Yeah.
by being the better you is helping the person next to you, and
Mhm.
and doing right by others, doing right by yourself. And it's sort of tongue in cheek, the Temple of Satan. It's like, well, we don't necessarily believe in a God in the Christian sense. So how can we get the attention of people? Well, fine, we'll just throw Satan in the title because that'll get their attention. But there's like no devil worshiping or anything like that. But there's this collective, right? That has created this this faith, this spirituality.
Yeah.
Um, but they just refer to themselves as the Temple of Satan. So
Right.
to me, it's something that you can find really just about anywhere. Um, but if you need it to be more specific, then great, you can
Yeah.
find that.
Absolutely, because I think it's really important, especially in conversations that I've had with friends, for example, that aren't religious in any kind of way, and they're like, "Oh, my experiences with Christianity, like, how will you feel if I say that?" And I'm like, I won't feel any type of way because faith is personal, you know. The
Yes,
way in which you define faith and where you find it is specific to you, and at no point should anyone be enforcing their faith or their beliefs onto you because those aren't necessarily your convictions. And if anything, the fact that the your friend's Temple of Satan as a recovery group is a perfect example of that because so many people's preconceived notions of faith and things, they would hear that and be like, whoa, that can't be. But it's a perfect
it
example,
is.
actually, of how faith has no specific uniform and recovery has no specific uniform as well. And when you were saying that, the thing that kind of popped into my mind was is that has there ever been a time or an experience in which maybe someone has, or a recovery program that you know of, has tried to enforce maybe certain religious principles that they felt were kind of like a model for the
Sure.
process of
I look, I'm not saying this as to shit on our 12-step program because it works. It really does. Okay. And what is conveyed over and over and over in a 12-step program is you just like no one's perfect, no one's a saint. You're not going to follow these suggestions perfectly, right? Like
yeah,
if some of it works for you, then you hold on to that and forget about the rest of it.
yeah,
So, through the spreading of the word about the 12-step program of that type of recovery, groups popped up everywhere. The tried and true way for a person to really find recovery, they get
yeah,
sober, they're abstinent from whatever it is, whatever a substance or an action, whatever that they're addicted to. Great, you found that, but in order to maintain that, you need to find a community, you need to find a group,
definitely.
you need to find peers, you need to find somebody that you can talk to that's going to relate to how you're feeling at the moment, what you did that day, anything that you any habit action that you take based on your addiction, they're going to understand and that's going to help you. So there are groups and meetings everywhere. And it's not just Alcoholics Anonymous. There are so many recovery groups that are out there that have been inspired by 12-step programs and they have created their own program system, what have you. And they create meetings. And
Okay.
I have a meeting, right? So, but it's what I'm getting at is that specifically to answer your question, yes. However, that is based really on like the group specific. Okay. So if there is a like the community aspect of it takes a village to do just about everything in life. Well, it takes a community of like-minded sober people to keep that sobriety and that recovery active. And if that means having more of a faith or a Christian based um, thought process, then yeah, you're going to find that. But if it needs to be Satan or Buddha or whatever or nothing
Yeah.
at all, right? You're going to find that. That is sort of the it's a beauty of recovery, I find, is that you can find like-minded people that share your values and your beliefs and what
Yeah.
you need to maintain. Um, However, just like anything, it's like, well, we found the answer, so this is the answer. That's where
Yeah.
it gets
That's where
tricky.
it gets a bit
Yeah,
tricky because you're completely neglecting those that answer isn't for them, but there is an answer.
right.
And I don't know whether this is a strong question to ask, but it came to mind and I was like, I don't know. Like obviously, you've made it very clear that you're speaking from your experience.
Mhm.
But I wanted to know from all that you've seen from your lived experience to the people in which you've encountered and those that you've supported, would you say there is a difference in the way in which people who are more faith-based per se and spirituality orientated um, are navigating recovery? Not navigating is actually the wrong word. I don't know if there's like a success. How would you?
That's a really good question. Some people are fortunate enough to when they get sober and they start active recovery that they find what works for them right away,
Yeah,
and they're able to maintain that and keep their recovery going. And as their recovery evolves and they evolve, uh, what they're using, what faith, what spirituality that they're using allows them to. It all kind of evolves together. There are people that find that. Um, and that's, I mean, they're the lucky ones. They're the lucky ones.
yeah.
I kind of have been that person, and I'm very fortunate. I'm very lucky that I haven't. I mean, I've had some hardships. Look, sobriety is really fucking hard,
Mm,
and so to that point, for me, my spirituality and faith had to change along the way,
right.
but it still kind of fit within the same box, if you will.
Yeah.
But there are people that come in to recovery and you know whatever community they're part of, they find somebody's like, well, this is exactly what you need to do. Okay, you need to follow this version of Christian faith to the T, and
Yeah.
that's going to keep you from relapsing, and it's going to keep you sober and keep you active and keep you happy. Well, whatever it is within that faith, it doesn't translate. It doesn't allow them to grow or to feel or to heal in the way
Yeah.
that they need to, and therefore they have a relapse. They come
Mm,
back in, and so then they're like, well, screw that idea. I'm going to try another one, right? And so sometimes it's trial and error. Sometimes people don't come back in, right? And they're like, well, fuck that. If that's what I have to do to stay sober, then
yeah.
screw it. I'm just doomed anyway. There isn't one particular answer that's going to
Mm,
work for everybody. I find, at least in my personal belief, is that message needs to be more, it needs to be talked about more,
absolutely.
like,
Yeah.
like there is no one way. There hasn't yet been a pill that's going to keep everybody, on the same level of recovery, right? It's up to the
Exactly.
individual and they're going to have to do the work to find it.
Yeah.
And it's a matter of if they want to do the work or not. And, maybe that's where the science aspect of it comes in. It's like, okay, well, if they have an understanding of the neurological aspects of addiction and how that has evolved in them and how that physically and mentally makes them feel either while they're in active addiction or while they're in recovery, that might be able to help them make, I don't know, sense or to rationalize in their own mind faith and spirituality based on either a religion or the universe or whatever it is that they feel they need. For me personally, this is my personal thought, is that and feelings, is that I believe in science wholeheartedly. And science takes us to a point. And
Yes.
as time goes on, and as the science evolves, and as we as a society and humans evolve, science keeps getting us farther and farther out there. But it hasn't. It just takes us to a point, and it's far out there. but
Yeah.
what's beyond
It's
it?
still the point. Yeah.
There's something beyond it, and that's whatever you
Believe
from
in.
there. You're like, well, what is that? That's what I interpret my faith as, is like there's something out there, and spirituality is like, well, there's something out there, there's an energy, and it makes us all collects us all together. Anyway, it's that kind of that's where I come from.
Mm,
But I'm also like the biggest proponent of, like, if that's what keeps you, sober, in active recovery, and happy and healthy,
then
rock on, man.
yeah,
Let's just
go for
stick
it.
with it.
Yeah, because like even before I touch on what I was thinking, like what you said about community, I really agree with. I've always believed that even if you didn't believe in a specific faith or spirituality, if we even just have tried to apply something logically, the world is so densely populated. There are billions of people. So for me, it would make no sense for us to live in this individualistic vacuum that is centered around ourselves, because how would that make sense? How would it make
Right.
sense to have all these different faces, people, stories, and only neglect them for ourselves? Like it doesn't add up, and it makes complete sense how that then is seen in something like recovery, which does not have just one lens. And then on the topic of trusting in science, because I think even with the questions of people trusting in their faith to heal them, where do people like lie on the like scientific spectrum? Have you encountered people that have been like, this is the hard truth, and this is why I am knowing which I am in the context of this substance? Or do you see people kind of use it in a synergy? Because I'll never forget when I was trying to understand the brain from a substance misuse perspective, and I was recommended a video, and in the comments, someone was like, this is the first time it's ever been explained to me what is going on, that it's not just me having a bad day and I seek this substance and no one else is doing so. Like I'm understanding on a brain level what is going on. And they said for them that helped them in their recovery, as they finally had some kind of piece to the puzzle that wasn't just neglecting what they felt was higher than them, but not necessarily a spiritual being.
Absolutely. I'm kind of one of those people. Growing up, I never really understood religion, and it didn't make any sense to me. It just seemed too fantastical, right? Um, so I swung hard against it. And
Mhm.
then years later in life, when I got sober, I got into therapy after about 4 years, and really started to open up and process a lot of traumas through some pretty gnarly abuse that I was subject to as a child and even into early adulthood. Um, and that really opened my eyes to the science of it, and it was like, oh, okay, so my body, I'm having a physical and emotional reaction to whatever circumstance, whatever situation or environment I'm in,
Yeah.
because of past attacks on my brain, right? Past attacks on my nervous system,
Yeah.
past attacks emotionally, right? I'm having a chemical, emotional, physical response to this action,
Mhm.
and now I know why.
Mhm.
And so through that was like, okay, well, then that would explain why I wanted to, find, once I discovered alcohol and the effect that it had over me, and other drugs beyond that, because once I found I had my first real beer at 18, and it had this like physical release over myself, that I felt different, and it was the most amazing feeling I had to that point in my life. And so addiction is, you just constantly chase that high.
Mhm.
Um and it did take me some time to work to understand what people mean by faith and by spirituality, and
Yeah.
how to implement that into the physical science of what actually is going on inside of me.
Yeah.
And what I have found is that, in my experience, is that, I haven't had one in a while. But for quite a few years, I was having physical flashbacks uh,
Yeah.
on a regular, and it was really hard to manage. And I finally just, decided one time that I'm like, fine, okay, I'll whatever, this spiritual aspect of recovery that people keep telling me about, fuck it, I will try that.
Yeah.
and it simply was something like, all right, you know, God, I see what you're doing here. All right, I'm just going to sit back and we're going to let this pass, right? Like I know I if I don't need to have a drink, I don't need to get high. I'm just all right, like just let's just get through this.
Yeah.
And that really helped me. And so as those would occur more and more frequently,
Mhm.
I was able to use an aspect of faith, an aspect of something outside of myself that would actually soothe me.
Yeah.
And maybe that makes me fortunate that I had those experiences at my age, at the point in my sobriety that I was in, and I was actively working really, really, really hard to keep and stay sober.
Yeah.
Um, but for me, that's what it is it's like it gives you an understanding of like, I mean, something is up, right? And it's just not like, God up there, like, poking me. Like there is something really like, physically and emotionally going on with me right now. And what the
Yeah.
fuck is it? So I find that the combination of the two is very, very powerful. And
Mhm.
I think it's important to find the messaging, the method, the delivery system, whatever it might be, to provide the scientific portion of recovery to people so they can look at both sides of it. Like
Yeah. And
you can't pray away cancer. You
yeah.
can't, right? And there are anomalies of people that have tried different concoctions of diets and exercises and receded. It went away. Well, okay, well really that's an anomaly. I guess if you want to believe in a God moment, that's more of a God moment than just sitting around praying for your cancer to go away and not doing anything about it. And that can be the same condition somebody might find themselves in with alcoholism or addiction of any kind, whether again substance or sex or food or gambling or just toxic relationships. And they're like, well, I'll just pray to God. God will take care of it. God will take it away. And it's like, well, there is this saying out there, and faith without works is dead,
Yeah. I
right?
was literally about to say
You
that.
know,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
and and I heard that for the first time, and I'm like, what the fuck does that even mean? And now I'm like, oh yeah, it's true. You
Yeah.
have to put in the work, all right? So the science helps you understand it, right?
Yeah.
So if you need to find a way to manage your mental and spirit and emotional and chemical balances within yourself, great, do it. But to help you with your insanity in the brain, the sort of emotional aspect of addiction,
Yeah.
then you're going to need to find something outside of yourself as another person or a church or any kind of community that can help you deal with that. So really to me, it's a combination of the two. And if you lean too heavily one way or the other, I think you're going to find that your results aren't going to be as beneficial as they could be if you were to allow yourself to look at both and find it rational.
That makes that makes complete sense as it's like the neglecting of one, maybe neglecting a phase of recovery in which may be really beneficial to you to finally have that understood.
Right.
And I can only imagine it makes me think culturally, the way in which, for example, like mental health is described sometimes, especially in older generations,
Yes.
how there's probably people that have existed specifically back home that maybe would have been really praying to God, like, God, please take away this addiction from me, please take away my desire for this substance, because they were being presented this narrative of you can only trust in God. If you are
Right.
to trust in anything else, your trust in God is lacking. But then they're kind of saying that no, like I've heard of these different things that help. And it's not that I'm denying him, it's a case of I'm exposing myself to the many different ways in which arguably could make me closer to him because I'm in a better state of recovery and so forth. It even reminds me of a Craving Clarity episode in which um one of the guest speakers was talking about in their clinic there was someone that described being sober and clean as different things, and it was very much based on where they were in their faith. That
Absolutely.
different, they were like, "Yeah, I'm not using, but you know what? I'm not praying in the way in which I wish to." And it was like when I first heard that, I was like, "Why would that be different? You're not using the drug." But it's a perfect example of how it's so individualistic, and they've at least allowed the two to reconcile, but maybe that's not the case for everyone. And yeah, it's a shame. I think it's a shame that there's so many people that, they will experience this kind of like battle, not only from themselves that we always have, but because of what they're hearing and what they're being fed outside. Um, yeah,
Well, I mean, humans are idiots. We're so easily manipulated.
yeah,
I mean,
yeah,
if we allow ourselves, we are incredibly intelligent beings and can do some amazing good and some amazing terrible things through our intelligence. But we're really just fucking idiots and so easy to manipulate, right? And that's unfortunate and that's sad for me. Because, they're yes, we're all different in many ways. But if you just stop and turn down the noise and get over your own bullshit, you're going to find out that we're all more alike than we think.
definitely.
And for me, my experience is that, you know, here in the United States right now, I don't know how it relates to past, American societies. But
Yeah.
right now, it's very divided.
Mm,
And it's divided for a lot of stupid fucking reasons.
yeah,
And if you really just stop for a second and look at the reasons that people are giving for this division, is it's all based on fear. Everybody
yeah,
is afraid. They're just afraid. And so, you brought up a really interesting point just a moment ago about being clean and being sober and how they can be seen as separate from one another.
yeah,
And I'm working on a project with a friend of mine, and we're working on like a seminar thing, but we'll talk about that outside of this. But one of the conversations that we were having just a couple of days ago was that if you look at the current climate of American society, it's chaotic, it's toxic, it's divided, it's filled with anger and fear.
yeah,
That's addiction. That's
yeah.
what addiction is, man. And
Absolutely.
we were like, I think that here in America, we need to work on our sobriety. And it is true. It's like we need some social sobriety. And so being sober and finding some recovery, because sober is abstinence, I find, right? And then recovery is the work that you do in it. And they kind of go hand in hand, but you
They're
know,
separate entities.
they're separate, I find. But you can be. It's like, well, yeah, well, let's okay. So we've got the substance use disorder aspect of addiction, and then you've got sex addiction, food addiction, gambling addiction. Okay, well, those are all kind of big ones. But what about the people that are always in toxic relationships? They
Yeah,
always keep going back to toxic relationships. They
yeah,
always keep this self-destructive behavior happening, and it's all relative and it's all very similar. And it's like, well, okay, we need to expand the conversation about sobriety and about recovery and about the neurology behind all of it, because it isn't just specific to drugs and alcohol and sex and food. And
exactly.
dopamine might, your brain might like being in these toxic relationships, might like having these violent, horrific, arguments and conversations and interactions. You might get your high off of it, right? And what are you doing? You do
Yeah.
you don't need to be doing
You're
that.
You're absolutely right, because even literally as you were describing, you're like chaotic. I was like, I'm hoping he says that this sounds like addiction, because it does,
Yeah.
the unpredictability of society within itself. And you're absolutely right, like with toxic relationships, for example, and people asking themselves just in a different lens, why do I keep on going back? I don't want to, I don't want to be with this person anymore. I don't want to interact with them, but there's so much more than just stopping that
Yes.
fails them in that way, but then because it's a more societally normative quote unquote addiction, no one's really going to look at it in the same lens and scrutiny
Oh
as they would
boy, they have bad
someone.
choices and partners and who they date.
Yeah,
It's like,
exactly.
stop drinking and just pull yourself up by the bootstraps. It's like, what's the fucking difference?
Yeah, like what's the difference? Because both of them, to whoever the individual is causing a detrimental amount of harm,
Yes.
whether it's through isolating you, that you're never seeing friends or family, you've completely changed, you used to have a spark that is never there, or you're life is completely derailed because this substance is affecting you financially, emotionally. When you remove whatever the substance is and you place in different words, then you're like, wait, this is extremely similar. And it's always been interesting to me. That was even something that led me to even wanting to do a project in addiction in the first place, is that it never made sense to me when people said just stop. Because I was like, we're intelligent enough as people that I'm certain that someone who has a substance misuse disorder knows that it is quote unquote wrong for them and where they want to be.
Was
But
for me. Absolutely.
like, yeah, like for where they want to be as a person, for what they want to accomplish, or just for who they believe themselves to be,
That was my
it's
problem.
not right. But then they still can't stop. So the narrative of just stop, it doesn't make sense because it's like, well, if it was that easy, of course they would. Like, of course, there's so many people that when they've just been told, oh, just put the drink down, I'm sure they wanted to turn around like, fuck you. Like if I was able to just say, oh, yep, that's it, last
Oh,
one, done. There we have it. But it's
Jesus.
never been
Been
that
waiting
simple.
my whole life for someone to tell me.
Exactly, like, all the money that they've spent on alcoholic anonymous books that they've heard, and they've thought, yes, if I buy this one, that will finally be the one in which clicks. But
Yes.
no. And that even leads me to even wonder, yes, science adds a part to the conversation, but how do you feel maybe science neglects the whole space of recovery and
Sure.
understanding it? Because I think from what you said, you've been able to read the literature and things like that. So is there any things that ever pop out that you're like, you guys are close but off the mark?
Yeah, well, I think, that's a great question because science tends to be definitive, right?
Okay.
Science wants to give you the answer.
Yeah,
And in many, 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 many cases, that is needed. We need
yeah,
the answer.
absolutely.
But when it comes down to, a person and, this is where it gets kind of, people might be kind of, what's the word I'm looking for? There's a specific word that I'm not, whatever, I can't find it, but here we go. So it's like, okay, science gives you the answer, right? And or gives you like definitive, for the most part, gives you the definitive answer on this is why this happened.
Yeah,
Boom.
very binary.
Yeah,
Yeah,
binary. Thank you. That's what I was looking for. But then, okay, so you've got science people, and then you've got faith slash religious people, right?
yeah,
And to them, okay, well, science is nice because if my back hurts now, I can take an aspirin or whatever, and the pain goes away. But
mhm,
for what's going on in here, what's going on emotionally, what's going on mentally and physically, yeah, that's for something up here. For something greater than me. Like science can help me get my heart rhythm back in shape, but is it
yeah,
really going to make me feel happier or make me understand my neighbor better?
yeah,
And the answer to that is no.
yeah,
However, if you were to have an open mind about like, well, let's think about why my neighbor acts the way that they do. Well, maybe there
yeah,
is something medically, maybe there is something scientifically to the way that they're doing it. And if you talk to your neighbor instead of ignoring him and pointing a finger and making fun of him because he wears a particular red hat, maybe you want to find out why they think and act that way. And maybe you would understand that, oh, that guy fought in a war. He was in a
yeah,
really bad car accident. And you
yeah,
might find that there is something medically or scientifically wrong with him. And they have a certain faith based belief system that they use that helps them get through that shit.
exactly.
And so it's everybody takes themselves too fucking seriously. It really is what it comes down to that I find. And everybody wants the recognition. Everybody likes to be on a pedestal and to be recognized. And that is beneficial to do the work and to get the recognition. But the important part I find is that what you do when you have that recognition, right?
Yeah,
Do you make it about yourself or do you make it about the greater good? And you can break that all the way down to religions, to music fans, to literature fans, to art, to
yeah,
football teams, whatever. People feel that they have found an answer and that is the only answer for anyone.
yeah,
And I find that they're afraid to allow themselves to be like, well, this is what works for me. What works for you? You
Yeah.
know, so
And
science is
it,
not detrimental to anything. It's incredibly important. Um, they're just we need to find a way to take the edge off of it. To science gives you the answer, okay, but let's round that answer off a little bit. It's not
yeah.
so definitive and sharp and kind of turns people off. It's like, well,
Yeah.
this is what happens. So now how do you feel about it? What are you going to do to understand it, to feel better about what's happening, right? For me, that's how addiction and recovery and sobriety allowed me to get there. And it is hard to do that, but it's not impossible. And a lot of it hinges on having conversations like this, allowing yourself to have a conversation with a person that has strong religious beliefs and you allowing yourself to be like, oh, okay, that I understand that. Okay,
Yeah.
that actually, well, that kind of makes a little sense. The thing about addiction is it takes freedom and personality away from you.
Mm.
And when people find something that gives them an identity and a more or less a freedom to feel and speak a certain way, it's very
Yeah.
powerful.
Yeah.
And because it made them feel the way that they feel and it gives them this self-empowerment, it then kind of like you don't ego is a big part of addiction as well. And
Yeah.
so then finding those aspects about yourself triggers the ego, and the ego then goes out and says, well, this is how it's done.
Yeah.
And it's like, but
And
you're not as sober as you fucking think you are. So that's kind of
yeah.
a long, I don't know if that really answered your question, but it's a lot
Yeah,
of
no, it does. It does because I think one thing, although early stages that I'm really trying to make sure is visible in the work that I do and would like to do is understanding where we fall short. I think as a scientist, it's very easy, like you said, to think it's a definitive answer, like this is how it fits. And this all now makes sense. But in so many ways that's not it. There are so many times in which maybe I've heard something that worked for someone else in a completely different context. I'm like, that didn't work for me. But the difference is that I'm not like, that's absolutely horseshit. I'm just like, that just worked for you, but it didn't work for me. And science then constructing itself a more around like a personalized, a more integration of that would undeniably be better because it's considering a lot more perspectives and people that, by what it sounds, it hasn't been doing so well so far.
it it
Um,
it hasn't, but it's not
it's not necessarily intentional.
right. It's not on purpose. It's yeah, it isn't intentional. It's
Yeah,
that I think um that there's so much pushback against science and faith in a very similar way, that it's the same coin with different sides, but they won't really in the big picture allow themselves to interact with one another. Sitting here talking with you about this, to me, a great marriage of the two would be, through science, through studies, through an understanding of the neurology of all of it and how that affects the emotional aspect of it, then which then trigger falls down into the physical and the faith based, is that if we can somehow say, okay, all right, this is science tells us this is what's happening with you. Okay.
yes,
So this particular uh, uh, form, okay, this is your diagnosis. Okay. This
yeah,
is what we can find is you fit within this diagnosis. And
yeah,
what we found is through this diagnosis, if you are to expose yourself to, you know, we these are suggestions. We're not saying to do this, but maybe just try exposing yourself to these different activities or thoughts, or hey, we found that if you read, this kind of literature, that might help you. You might find a way to help, you know, soothe your nervous system
yeah,
by exposing yourself to these things.
yeah,
Um, but that isn't the case. But then, on the other side of that, faith and spirituality and to a greater extent religion isn't going to be like, well, if praying's not working, maybe this is going on inside your head.
yeah, Yeah, it's true.
right? And I don't know how we can deliver the message to kind of inform both sides that, like, well, instead of railing against each other, how can we work together?
Yeah, in appreciating that there's value in each.
Yeah, there is.
I think with so much resistance with what the other side is saying, the reason why the marriage never works and doesn't even get to the point of engagement or even divorce is because when you've kind of told yourself, this is terrible to hear, this is terrible, it completely goes against everything, you're completely neglecting even just the frame of mind that would say, you know what, I may not necessarily agree, but the same way in which I wish to understand my neighbor, let me hear this and see if maybe if it doesn't resonate with me, it resonate with him if I was to speak to him about it.
Right,
Because then, although it hasn't necessarily been the direct quote unquote solver for your journey, it's done something to another that arguably your faith or science has been saying is important to do as well, you know, that community. But yeah, it's a tricky one as like we said, with science it's not intentional. And then I also appreciate that there are many people that are religious and of the faiths that they actually don't know any better because of the resistance to that exposure, that for them to now sit down and be like, I'm gonna accept to hear something, but navigate that this isn't now my new quote unquote God, like where does that then lie? But like on the topic of seeing things like as God, and I don't know whether it's a dumb question, but obviously with you being a sober coach, um, do you feel like it's ever changed your perspective on faith, spirituality, or healing? And yeah, let me start there. Like, do you feel like it's ever changed your perspective on that, especially with the role in which you're in?
it has, yes, because sobriety and recovery, it we always say active recovery, right? And active sobriety, and that active, it means action, right? You're taking
Yeah.
action. And if you do the same redundant action over and over and over again, I mean, that's insanity. You're expecting the same result, right? It's not going to happen. So, whatever gets you to the place where you are allowing yourself to look at spirituality, to consider a faith or to consider a religion, that's not the end answer. That is just where you are at that time. But you
Yeah,
need to make sure that you allow yourself to let that evolve.
yeah,
And, as a sponsor and as a coach, that is something that is important to make sure that you are expressing and guiding people to, is like, I am not going to heal you. I am not going to take away these thoughts, these feelings, these actions. What
I'm not
I
your
can
God,
do, yeah,
essentially.
I'm not your God, but what I can do is I can lead you on a path that's going to show you, hey, okay, that's not working any longer, right? Or it doesn't seem to be giving what you need. Why do you think that is? You know?
Okay.
And okay, well then whatever the answer is, well, like, okay, well then maybe look over here and try that or try this.
Yeah.
Or and that's where a lot of people in sobriety get stuck. You get
Mm,
stuck. You kind of plateau. Like, all right. And that to me is like really, really, really important. And that is what has motivated me to do what I'm doing, to have these conversations, is that in society, I say this every single time I bring it up, but in the recovery industry, as it's now known, they get you in and they
mm,
get you sober and they get you on your path, and that is awesome. That that
yeah.
is that is a really difficult thing to do.
Okay.
However, it's the easiest part of your sobriety. The hardest part is what happens after it, right? Because I get sober at a certain age, everybody figures they're going to live a lot longer in life, right? And maybe they're lucky enough they will. So that means from this point forward, I'm not able to live the lifestyle that I led before. And that includes alcohol, that includes whatever, right? So I have to make this conscious decision to live a life of abstinence, to not do that any longer. Yes. But
Yeah.
how are you going to do it?
How are you going to do that? How are you actually going to maintain? it because on TikTok, which I am chronically on, um, I remember, I don't know how, and probably this is a testament to our phones listening to us. A video came up, well, series, and it was people basically talking about their recovery. They were like, it's people make it seem like, saying I'm sober like one day and I'm finally sober, I'm not using the drug is the most difficult part. They're like, no, it's maybe day 1000 in, and you're like, huh, this is a lot more difficult than the initiation to even get here. And have I actually got the tools, the ways that work for me to get to that next point in time to kind of like ride throughout how I feel right now? And I think what you're describing is very much that simplistic view of like, oh, if you just get there, everything will be fine afterwards. And it's like, no, if anything, the journey afterwards is probably a lot more strenuous because there's so much more to consider. You
Right.
now know the experience of being sober in the context or recovering in which is best for you. And how do I uphold myself to that, but not then, you know, be self-deprecating and things like that when all of these different emotions and
Right. There's a habitual like self treatment that either led you to your addiction or
yeah,
was created and then amplified during your addiction.
yeah,
Um, and to your point, they were like, "Well, it's day 1000, and why do I feel like I'm an asshole?"
exactly.
And
Yeah,
it's never a stressful day at work. It's never a bad job review. It's never getting dumped, right?
mm,
It's you wake up and you're just a raging fucking asshole and you
yeah,
don't know why. You
yeah,
don't know why. What do I do now? What do I do now? And
yeah,
and that's when people fall off because it snowballs. And that's where, to me, science is very important.
yeah,
Because, okay, well, why am I doing this? Why am I doing that? Why am I doing this? It's like, well, maybe fine, then just break it all the way down.
yeah,
Feeling this emotion because of this, and it all started in this part of your brain, which is healing because you
yeah,
damaged the fuck out of it.
yeah.
That's what's happening. So you understand, okay, definitively, this is what's happening to me. It might take the whole day or a week for me to get through this part. So, what can I do to help me get through this part that's not going to be shooting up or getting drunk or whatever, right?
Yeah.
And I had a meeting with a friend yesterday, and it, he's we get on the topic of like, dry January and
Yeah,
free
yeah,
booze February, all this stuff, right? And he's like, "So yeah, I mean, what do you think about that?" And I'm like, "It's all bullshit, man."
yeah. It's like fad diets, like you
Exactly. It's like we're on the next fad diet. I'm like, and
exactly.
please don't get me wrong because I don't want to discount the mission that was initially started with Dry January. All right.
Yeah,
Just like anything else, it becomes cool, it becomes cultural, and pretty soon people are wearing fucking t-shirts about how they're sober. And I'm like, sobriety is not a t-shirt. Sobriety is not a bottle of water. Sobriety is not something that you pimp out like that. It isn't. It sends to me, it sends the wrong the messaging is off. I applaud that they're putting the effort to get sobriety out there, to get it in the conversation, to get it in the national lexicon here. But it's more than a word. It's more than the stopping, right?
yeah,
It is a yeah, sober life. It is a fucking lifestyle. And I appreciate that in order to get messaging out, we have to use certain avenues to do it. And thank God. I mean, thank God it is there because it gets people's attention. It gets people to interested into finding out what it actually means, right?
yeah,
But it's important to help them get past wearing the t-shirt,
yeah,
past the hashtag,
yeah,
right? And that's where I call bullshit on all of it is because it's like, cool, okay, now that you stopped, what are we going to do? What are you
yeah.
going to do?
Like
Right? You can't
providing
keep buying
the
t-shirts.
exactly.
I
Need
mean,
to. You've got to provide it's even like with the whole social media lens is that I often really applaud creators that if they are maybe talking about their sobriety, they talk about it in a very real way. They don't say like, oh yeah, this is how it worked for me, and every day's been like amazing. Like some will literally set up their camera and be like, today was an incredibly difficult day. And I can't actually tell you what has made it difficult. I can't say that, I stubbed my foot on the toe. I stubbed my foot on the door, then I had a terrible email at work. No, it's just how it goes. And you're absolutely right about that reconciliation with science, being able to break it down. Like for people to finally maybe say, the reason why I feel like this on day 1000 is because I'm still healing, and the healing as like sobriety is lifelong, No, I don't think anyone ever wakes up on the journey and is like, "Yep, that's it. That was
I
that
made
was
it.
it. Season. I made it. I'm on the other side, and
Bingo.
I'm good to go. Take me off this train because I'm onto a new one." Of
Yeah.
course, you know,
No,
and
it requires a ton of maintenance and
yeah,
diligence, and if you need to break it down to a physical training program, then break it down like that. Some days you're
yeah,
feeling great at the gym.
yeah,
A lot of the days
literally,
you're not, right?
yeah,
And
yeah.
but in order to stay fit, you got to keep it up.
Exactly, you've got to keep on going, like, I always tell people, especially as someone that lost a lot of weight, and they're like, "Oh, you must love the gym, you must love going every day." I'm like, Absolutely not. Do you not think there's many days that I don't look at that, M&S, or is it Waitrose? It's like a coconut and lime ice cream. I'm like, "Absolutely." Like, I would
Yeah.
love to just lay in bed and eat that, but then I've recognized that the journey and the goals in which I've set for myself, there's somewhere else I need to be, which is the gym, lifting a weight that is criminally heavy. But it is because I've got to maintain where I am right now and for it to kind of path and craft into where I wish to be. And it's the exact same in the way in which you're describing it as well. When people only describe it as like this stop, if anything, that's a lot more dangerous for people going forward because then they're like, so what happens next?
Yeah.
Who do I turn to? And because maybe they haven't been able to reconcile both their faith and science, they feel like there's not one way in which I can, approach this that's helpful and which will lead to like a relapse and so forth. And
And
it's really
it's
hard.
I get I roll my eyes a lot at some of my peers that are out there trying to help others by speaking about it.
Yeah. Why is that?
Because hey, look, everybody has to put food on the table and earn a living. And a friend of mine told me not that long ago, like, it's okay, Chad, if you need to make money off your story. Like, if it helps people and you can make money doing it, do it. Cool.
Yeah.
I will if I can. But I still ultimately want to be helping people. It is that the messaging that I'm trying to put out there is that one, you're not alone.
Yeah.
Two, you can do it.
Mhm.
And three, it's incredibly fucking messy. So just heads up.
Yeah.
And four, I'm not going to cure you, right?
Mhm. Mhm.
There's a lot of packaged content out there, whether it's books or blogs or other podcasts that are packaged in a way that is inviting and whatever it takes, right? I get it. If that draws you in because you're suffering from, you know, substance use disorder and that draws you in and what they're telling you helps you and helps you to stop. That's
Yeah.
great. But
Yeah.
sometimes they take it farther and act as if this is the answer.
Yeah. This is the central dogma, essentially.
I'm like, I mean, if you're gonna make money, don't sell them bullshit because you're not helping any of us.
Yeah.
You're muddying the waters. You're giving a bad name for the sake of a dollar. And
Yeah.
if you want to like earn a dollar doing it, then be truthful and be honest about it, right? Like the more people know that addiction is awful and ugly and so incredibly fucking painful. The pain that comes with addiction. I'm not talking about like stubbing your toe or having
Yeah.
a headache or having a bad day at work. I mean, you know, when you are at the point in your life where suicide is the only option you see, that's a horrible place to be. And I don't wish that on anyone, man. I truly anyone. Um, and to take advantage of that, and I feel like sometimes people take advantage of that with some of the recovery, sobriety,
Yeah.
peer related stuff that's put out there. And I mean, I roll my eyes because it's like, yeah, I get it because I'd love to make money off of it too, but I feel you're doing us all a disservice by
The
doing
service, yeah,
that. Yeah.
absolutely right. Like, I can I think what comes to mind immediately is that, even in the academia sense, it's very well known that researchers are not paid
Right.
brilliant bucks, but so many champion the fact that, and I understand it, is that yes, we may not be paid well, but we would rather the work in which we put out or the ways in which we use our skills are truly beneficial. They truly make a change. And the same in the quote unquote recovery industry as well. You would hope that people are putting out things in which they know that, especially from the positions that they've been in, that'll actually be helpful. When someone searches for something to tap into, content, a community, they know that they're actually finding something that's trustworthy and grounded in true integrity. But as you said, for people's different reasons, but it's still a shame, even with the many different reasons that would draw someone, because ultimately that would then maybe draw in someone that is literally looking at it as their last hope. And they unfortunately find themselves in something that wasn't made or created with essentially their best interest in recovery and sobriety in mind.
And it never brings them back either,
Yeah,
which is
yeah,
sad.
it's very
Well,
sad.
this has been great. this has been
Yeah,
this
yeah,
has been really, really good.
a
Um,
lot than I
I,
imagined.
yeah, I just, on a personal level, and I will say this so people can hear it, I'm just really, really happy that we were able to connect because whatever you want to say, man, God or the universe works in mysterious ways. Well, yeah, sure, it does because you and I connected and it led us to where we are and what we're creating. And I'm very, very proud of it. And I hope you feel that way too, because I really feel that this is gonna make a difference for some people. And if we're able to make a difference in at least even one person's life and it helps them,
It's a big one.
then we did it, man. But
Yeah.
my ego tells me I hope it like, solves the world's problems. So
Yeah.
I'll dream big.
Yeah, let's dream big because it's like they say, if you aim for this moon or if you
Yeah.
amongst the stars or something like that. But no, as you said, I'm very proud of it as well because I think I've always kind of acknowledged that, I don't have the lived experience of substance misuse or addiction, but I recognize that my privilege is being in a place of education and where the research is readily available and accessible to me, that it would be such a disservice that when we're in such a time that people just want to understand why, you
Yeah.
know, what can we do to better amplify and spread that why? And I would like, maybe I'm biased, but I feel like this collaboration absolutely does that, you know.
Oh, I believe it too, and I feel it, and I think it is a great way to help cut through all the noise because
Absolutely.
um, where we are um, scientifically, medically, and the avenues that we have spiritually in faith and in religion, we're at the perfect time to marry the two, and it needs to be made clear that it's okay to do that.
Yeah,
It's
yeah,
really okay. You don't have to be one or the other, and that the science is advanced so much that we are able to break it down and make it more digestible and understandable for people. And to hey, what? Guess what? To me, this is the most important of all of the stuff that we're doing is like you are not broken.
yeah, exactly. You're
You're
not
not.
this broken vessel or individual that compared to others that you just haven't got it together essentially, but they do, you know. Life is way too variable to ever place such a title, label upon yourself. And unfortunately, I'm sure many people have come across that where people have described them as this broken being and they feel like they've had to kind of like take that on. But no, you're not broken, you're not far beyond becoming the person in which you desire to be, you know. Although your journey may look longer or shorter than anyone else's, it's yours for a reason.
Yeah.
And that doesn't make it any less valuable.
Embrace it, man. Embrace it.
Exactly.
Thanks,
Exactly.
Brianna.
No, thank you. Thank you so much. This was great. I wish Thursdays could always be like this.
Yeah, I know. Now I get to go. It's like it's 11:40 here, so I still have my whole day.
Okay, it's 5:40
I
p.m.
know. I've been watching the sunset there. I'm like, she's.
Yeah, I literally was like thinking if this was on video, you would just see the room get darker and darker and darker and think, does she have money for electricity? It's like, yes, it's just my sun is going down.
Oh, that's awesome. Well, thanks again.
Thank you so much.
I hope you enjoyed that. I had a blast, and I know Brianna did too. And it's important that we have these conversations and put them out there. People need to be aware of what, addiction is like, whether you are the person who is suffering with addiction or a family member or a friend, or you're just curious about it. Having as much information as you can is the best way to go about it. And putting it out there, I can't stress it enough. If you're doing it, be honest about it, be open about it. It helps yourself, but it also is very helpful and very powerful to people that need the help, that are seeking the help. To have these conversations, we need to open them up a little bit more and have more open conversations about addiction and recovery. Next week, another episode 3 of Craving Clarity meets Not All There. And it's with Danielle. We really get into the weeds about the brain and addiction and the science of the two. And just as a reminder, I am out there as your sober coach, soberchad.com. That's me. If you need to email me for anything for the show, for information about the coaching programs, you can reach me at chad@soberchad.com, chad@soberchad.com. All right, everybody, be kind and loving to yourself, be kind and loving to others. We can spread some kindness, we can spread some love. Take care of yourself. Talk to you next time.